Welcome, my friends, to the 40th episode of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing Asterios Polyp by David Mazzuchelli, first published by Pantheon Books in 2009. I am Aaron Walther, and with me today are two of my absolute favorite guests and artistic collaborators, or hopefully one day an artistic collaborator. The would-be artistic collaborator is my good friend Mr. Alex Harner. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And the regular standard artistic collaborator is the amazingly and impossibly talented Mr. Kevin Bandt. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
So, I want to say, without an ounce of sarcasm, that our discussion of Asterios Polyp is sure to be the most popular episode of Comic DNA of all time. I am sure that all of those Skull Kickers fans are just anxiously waiting to listen to us talk about a highbrow art comic about architecture and middle-aged ennui and
Absolutely.
divorce.
I mean, the parallels are limitless.
Seriously, though, Asterios Polyp is one of my absolute favorite comic works ever created. And I imagine that this is exactly what Will Eisner envisioned when he coined the term graphic novel in the 70s. Like, this is that book. I'm as you can tell, I'm really excited to talk about it, especially with these two particular individuals, my artistic know-it-alls, as I refer to you behind your backs.
I see.
So, listeners of this podcast, you might know David Mazzuchelli. He's probably most known for his work with Frank Miller as the artist for both Batman Year One and Daredevil Born Again, which are two of Miller's most popular works, and I would say two of the most essential stories for their respective characters. Or at least they're definitely considered so by fans. But let's see, those were both back in the 80s.
Right.
And
a while back.
It's been a while. Which is not to suggest that Asterios Polyp is without its own recognition. The book, Asterios Polyp, won 3 Eisner Awards and 3 Harvey Awards. So it has a different type of recognition than than your Batman and your Daredevil comics.
Right.
It's quite a bit different from those mainstream superhero comics in pretty much every way possible, I would say. I'll go ahead and try to sum up the plot of the book as succinctly as possible. So, Asterios Polyp is a book about our titular character, Asterios, a professor of architecture in upstate New York. And in the story, he's coming to terms with his life, career, and divorce. On his 50th birthday, his apartment is struck by lightning and burns down. With nothing but the clothes on his back, he buys a bus ticket to take him as far away as possible. He settles in a small town and gets a job working at an auto shop, where he makes friends with the locals and reflects on his life and failed marriage. Now, examining the plot like that, you could say it's a pretty simple character drama about a guy having some kind of midlife crisis, but it's also a deeply philosophical book, and the true depths of this book really come from the form and structure of the art in which the story is told. So that's why I'm so lucky to be joined by you two artistic fellows, because I'm not really much of an artist. I'm more of a wannabe artist.
You are a writer, and
I am a writer.
You make visual art sometimes.
I am a writer who wanted to be an artist when he was a kid, but I never had the patience to really study and practice art. So while I like to study art, like, on my own, I have no formal schooling or training. But lucky for me, as I keep saying, I'm probably going to edit out a few of those.
No problem.
Lucky for
You're
me,
just so lucky.
I'm just a lucky guy.
Lucky boy.
But Kevin and Alex, I think you guys both have some experience and training in art. So before we start talking about this book and really kind of get into the meat of what it's about and what it is, I want to hear kind of where you guys come from, how you came to art, and what your schooling and education is on it. So Kevin, why don't we start with you, since I would say you're the most prolific of the two.
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to give myself a lot of credit.
I'll give it to you.
Pretty lazy. I've been pretty lazy. I've got a reputation as being pretty lazy. No, I started as the guy in high school who was always drawing in my notebook, and there was a teacher in high school that was like, "Yeah, you need to go to art school," and I'm like, "Well, I can't really afford that." And he's like, "Well, I'll just go to a regular school and study art." You know, that it exists that way. You don't have to go to the art institute. It's fine. And so I went to Wisconsin's got kind of a weird educational system. It was actually set up by Abraham Lincoln back in the day,
wow.
I believe. It was the extension system was like so they have the UW extension system, and there's all these different satellite schools that come off of Madison. And so there's UW Milwaukee, UW Eau Claire, UW Stevens Point, and La Crosse. And I went to Whitewater, it's a small school. It's more known for its business and its education programs. So it turns out a lot of teachers and entrepreneurs and business-minded people. The chairman of the RNC, Rince Priebus, went to Whitewater. He was actually in the same frat as my roommate in college was, and that was their big thing. It was like, oh, this guy came from Delta Chi Omega, so that's why I'm joining this group. And it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, the art school pretty much took up one building. We had everything from ceramic sculpture and drawing and painting all in one building, and then it even extended further. The theater and the music department was all in that same building. So we had a clash of personalities for sure in that little microverse of a building. And
Would you say you had an energized creative environment? A supercharged creative environment?
It was interesting. You know, one of the things that we had to do is take cross-disciplinary classes. And so I did not play an instrument. I did not want to sing in front of people. And so I took some theater classes, and honest to God, those theater classes were like, I didn't know it at the time, but they've been really important to me in like my life. It's so stupid. But that was like the first class where I worked with tools and built things and sewed. I had to sew costumes and all this stuff. And it's like, but we also did a lot of theater, stage design and theater appreciation stuff I'm like, oh, well, this is where Will Eisner, like, this is where he's getting this from. Because if you look at Eisner, like, his stuff is hugely influenced by the theater and opera. And, like, when I was taking those classes, I hated them. I absolutely hated them. There's such a difference in personality between a drawing and painting major and a theater major. I'd walk into that class and be like, there's so many weirdos in here. and I was just a different type of weirdo. So yeah, I did a BFA in illustration at UW Whitewater, and by the time I was done, I could have stayed another semester. I think like at the time I graduated in 2007, the fall semester, and that was my 4.5 years I'd been there. And a lot of people were taking that 5th year. They were gonna take one more semester, and it was because it was the fall of 2007 was sort of the beginning of the end of the economy. You know, that was like when I left school, there was several companies that I was like, oh, I've got a job as soon as I get out of school. Gonna be doing video game design. You know, they're hiring artists. And I had a little bit of 3D. I worked in Maya, Autodesk Maya, and ZBrush, and I had not anything I would call a good portfolio in that stuff. It was just like, oh, I knew how to use it and I could draw and paint, so they'll love me. And I had a couple people that were like, yeah, we'll hire you. And then, like, as soon as graduation happened, they're like, yeah, we're not hiring. And you just kind of knew, like, oh yeah, nobody's hiring. And so I had to sort of adapt from there. And looking back, it's a good thing I did, because I would never have made comics, I don't think. At least not the way that I have. But at the time, it was like, even to this day, I look back, I'm like, that was a pretty traumatic, like.
That's a tough transition.
Here, you're in this sort of sheltered, little environment that you lived in, and where, like, people appreciated you and cared to see what you had to say next, and to be like, real world, here you go, I'll shove you out into it and see what happens. A lot of my friends, they like talk about the post-graduation depression.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And like I look back, I'm like, I don't think I had that, but now I definitely think, like, oh yeah, there was like a good 9 months where I didn't make anything, I didn't do anything. Maybe my alcohol consumption went up a little bit during those months. It's just, it was interesting to be like, oh yeah, everything that you were told about the possibilities of your life and what you're going to get out of this degree, it's not what they said it was. It was interesting. It was jarring. But I think the people that came out of school when we did, or when my class did, we sort of had to be better. You couldn't just be like, well, in Asterios, they talk about, or Asterios, he walks up to somebody and says, can I have a job? And he's like, sure.
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't happen.
That is not the real world.
That's old economy right there.
Yeah.
Like, I got off a bus and this guy gave me a job.
And a place to live.
And a place to live.
Hey stranger, you want to move into my house with my wife and my kid? Sure. So then I got my BFA in illustration. I went out to the world and said, oh well, nobody's gonna hire me, so I have to make this on my own and be my own kind of boss. And I started making comics then, and kind of right now in a transition between like comics, sculpture, and animation right now. It's kind of weird, but I'm still creative. That's the thing.
Yeah, you're running the gamut, just doing it all.
Oh, and I'm working in printmaking, so that's where I make my money now. So somebody does pay me for making stuff. It's just not my stuff.
Right.
I work in a printing press.
That's very cool.
Yeah, all right. So, Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about your artistic background?
Alrighty. Well, like Kevin, I started drawing at a young age. I think probably in high school is when I started to get really excited about the possibility of art as a career, or trying to make a living in that. It was in high school that Aaron and I met in art class, I think. So we've been friends for quite a while. But that's kind of when I got more interested in comics. I think I've always been interested in comics, but really liked to draw, like, illustration and storytelling, just as a fun thing. I mean, in high school we would go to the comic shop every Wednesday, a group of us, and sound off our opinions on the drive home about what was good and bad. Much like now, but much less informed.
Right.
But yeah, after high school, I ended up going to a liberal arts school, where I focused on art, but the nature of the school was much more broad, so I had to study a little bit of everything. My art classes were my favorite classes, where I had the most fun. But I also had to take literature and history and economics and everything else pretty consistently throughout my time there. So the art I did, I had a lot of fun with, but it wasn't the most specialized. I kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything. A lot of classical figure drawing, sculpture, oil painting, and very, very traditional. It wasn't a school. The school was Hillsdale College. It's not a school that is what I would call pushing boundaries in terms of progressive contemporary art. They're much more about foundational classical training.
So I'm jealous of you right now. My school was all concept. It was
okay.
It was like you could put like a squiggle on a line of paper, and as long as you could defend it,
Uh-huh.
or squiggle on a piece of paper and just like defend it to death and be like, this is about the Holocaust. And as long as you just stuck to your guns,
Right.
good job. Everybody loves you.
If you can make the argument, and yeah, absolutely.
And if I could have that sort of atelier sort of style schooling, oh man, I am jealous of you.
It's funny because I think when I was in school, alongside a lot of the other art majors, we all delighted in drawing people and that kind of training, but we also, I guess because we were young and easily discontent, we also grumbled a lot about the fact that we didn't get to do conceptual stuff and we didn't get to do experimental stuff, and I think we were jealous of what the kind of experience you were getting. So I think it's
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that, the classical grounding. But I wonder sometimes if I had had a few more classes where we did get to defend crazy things. Yeah, it might have been interesting. But after that, much like Kevin was saying, you graduate school and suddenly you're not really sure what to do with yourself because you're suddenly in a world that doesn't really care about supporting you. You have to prove that you have skills that are employable. And I didn't do great with that. I floundered about, and I was kind of non-committal, and wasn't really sure what to do. So what I ended up doing was going back to school, because why not? It's safe, right?
Seems it's worked so far. Right. Staying in school has worked so far. Just keep it going. Just
keep that bubble up. And I went back to school for architecture, thinking at the time that it was a good practical application of my creative interests. And I remember reading all these bios on a lot of these European, especially Italian artists, who, 30 years ago, studied architecture and then went into illustration afterwards. And thinking, that's cool, because, architecture, again, it's very technically grounded. It will make you learn perspective. It will make you learn sort of a very rigorous approach to things. Thinking to myself, even if I don't do architecture, this will be beneficial to me in terms of the art that I enjoyed. And that turned out to not be entirely true. Only because, in terms of, and I'll try and not ramble on for too long here, in terms of thinking about design problems, architecture and architectural education is great, but nobody draws anymore by hand. The world kind of switched to computers, 15, 20 years ago, and so if you want to model something three-dimensionally and trace over it, that's certainly beneficial to the illustration side of things. But I didn't actually do that much drawing with a pencil in school. It was much more learning AutoCAD and learning umpteen other programs, which are interesting, but very different from I think what most people think of when you think of illustration, especially if you prefer something with more of a human touch. So I went to architecture school. I finished up in December of 2011. I am currently working as an architect. I am technically an intern architect, which means I'm not licensed yet, which is not particularly interesting. But it means I'm climbing the ladder. Beyond that, I spent a year on a little detour a year ago teaching middle school and high school art because an opportunity came up and I wanted to try it, which was definitely eye-opening. It was an adventure.
You learned more in that 1 year,
man,
than you did.
What sort of school were you teaching at?
I taught at a charter school in just outside Austin, Texas. It was a new charter school. It was honestly, it was a really interesting and by and large a very good experience. But yeah, if you learn more from teaching kids in a year than, I don't know, probably anything else I've done. It's intense and crazy and surprising. It's not what I'm doing now, but who knows? Who knows what the future might hold? So yeah, I guess in summation, I went from a broad art education to architecture, to working architecture, to teaching kids art for a year, and then back to architecture. So that's my story.
You got a nice little sabbatical in there where you're like, oh yeah, this craziness out there,
Yeah.
back to a sort of like rigid
Right.
reality of architecture.
Right. Yeah. Computers and deadlines and consultants. It's very different than middle schoolers. Total opposite.
Oh, I bet. That's a fascinating detour and then sort of back onto your career.
Yeah. It's a good life experience if you get a chance, you know? You learn from kids. They're wild.
And you didn't need a special certification or anything, or just was your degree was? I suppose charter schools are kind of pushing for real world experience in the field.
That's a good question. In most public schools, yes, you would have to have teacher certification. In charter schools, depending on how they structure themselves, they will hire people without a teacher's license, provided they meet other criteria. For instance, they have so much experience in a field, or they have a master's degree, or they have proficiency in, a particular discipline, whatever. So, yeah, it's not a common thing, but it is out there if you know where to look.
Yeah, no, I live in Wisconsin. We have a Republican governor that I think a lot of it is sort of like an attack on the teachers union, but he opened up the entire state to that sort of formula of if you can, if you've been working as a mathematician, for the last up teen years, you don't need to go back to school and prove you know math, to teach math. And that's definitely, from his point of view, our governor, he's definitely trying to take a little bit of the wind out of the sails of the teachers unions. But it's also kind of common sense a little
right.
bit. I know this field. I've been doing it for a million years. I don't need to go back to school to prove that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I think it's a good thing,
Yeah, it's an interesting experiment, especially given the challenges of education in our country right now. I think in certain places it's worked really well, from what I understand. In certain places, charter schools have had trouble kind of getting things together, and there's certainly been problems. There's been bad charter schools as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, you definitely see that.
Yeah. But it all depends. I mean, with the right group of people, with the right skill set, you don't necessarily have to have a degree in child psychology to be a good math teacher. You need to know math and care about kids.
Right.
So, it's an interesting thing.
So you were going into architecture thinking it was going to be T-squares and pencils and blue lines, and you were learning AutoCAD and probably some other 3D and
Yeah.
vector-based stuff.
Yeah. Going in, when I applied to architecture school back in 2007, 2006, somewhere around there, my impression, having no real knowledge of the profession, was that, you see guys with their T-squares, and you see them working over their drawing desks. But those are kind of images from the past. It's not really how it's done anymore. And even
Which
more
is the
so.
same for comics.
Yeah.
Comics, there are the guys that are like traditionalists, but by and large, there's a lot of computer illustration that's completely replaced that.
Right. Yeah, it's just kind of where the world is at right now, for better or worse. So, yeah.
So what were your thoughts on Asterios, the architect?
The architect.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to just briefly interject here. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about your guys' background in art and kind of get you guys get familiar with your schooling and all, because the book itself, I mean, the main character, Asterios, he is an architect, but he's an architect teacher. So, Alex, this seems like a kind of book you would have a certain connection to. I think that someone like me wouldn't.
I suppose there's a little bit of overlap with.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never taught at a university level, but
right.
I've seen a lot of teachers at university levels
right.
teaching architecture and learned from them. Yeah, I mean, more than anything, the book is a character study about this man who is he has a very sort of rigid view of the world. And he kind of has to rethink things and, come to terms with all of the junk in his life. But I really like that Mazzucchelli he chose to make him an architecture professor. I thought that was a really good way to reinforce a lot of the ideas that he delivers. I guess so. So your question was, what do I think of him as an architect, or as how he is represented as an architecture teacher? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. How to put this? To be diplomatic, or I should just
put it out there.
I'll just say it. Architecture school for me, it was a graduate program. And it was a pretty intense experience, and I think I can say it's not an experience I would do again. And a lot of that is due to the ego of the people involved and the sort of general environment that is created by that. So while I don't think I had any professors that were as blatantly ruthless to me as an individual as Asterios is to some of his students in a few pages in this, those little moments are based on conversations that I feel like I've overheard a few times, where an academic with big ideas who wants to knock down a student, send him down a few pegs, keep him humble, as it were. It can be pretty harsh, and there's a lot of sort of intense philosophical moralizing that surrounds these questions that are ultimately like, what shape is your roof? Right? Yeah. And I do enjoy those conversations. I think they're interesting, but taking them with a grain of salt, I think, is really important. And my experience in school is that the intensity of it and the desire to succeed makes it very easy to lose sight of that. I mean, I saw it in the students, and I think in the faculty as well sometimes. Ego would sort of trump, cool-headed conversation. And you get these people, kind of like Asterios Polyp, who they sort of make architecture their religion. And you think, do you actually live your life this way? Is it possible to live your life this way? Which I think is something that's very touched on in this graphic novel.
Oh, absolutely.
He has to come to terms with the fact that the world doesn't really work exactly as he would like it to work, as the structures that he thinks are perfect.
It's definitely about taking him out of his comfort.
Yeah.
He's very comfortable in his perfectly designed world where everything has its place, and literally when he moves, or when he basically takes a Greyhound bus to, was it Apogee?
Yeah, Apogee.
Apogee, yeah. He basically is thrown into a world where, number one, the building is very decorative and not designed in a way that he would find comforting.
Right.
And it's all, it's surrounded by flooded water. And when he finally gets a room of his own, Ursula has basically thrown the room all over. There's stuff upside down.
Right.
Because she felt that was a more feng shui way of designing the room. It was literally tables upside down and
not just
cocked sideways.
Not just the design she liked. She specifically thought that's what it should be for him, because she was basing it off his astrological sign. So she was specifically saying this is what your life. This is what your life is. This is
what you need.
This is what you need, and it's the exact opposite of everything that he's ever demanded out of life.
Right.
And it's
the world he's created.
He's such a reason-based character for him to be oh yeah, my astrological sign is what determines how I want my room. Oh great, thank you so much.
Yeah. He's got that that condescending attitude.
They literally draw him with his nose sticking up. Mazzucchelli, he's got his nose Let's talk a second about the design of him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's I was looking at it and thinking about it as the old UPA Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons. If you were going to draw a snob, what shape would a snob be? And this is the shape, this upturned nose, and eyes sort of pointing downward.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The fact that
he's perfect snob.
You never actually see his face from the front. It's always that really strong shape that you're describing. It's very funny. It's very clever.
Always only see him in profile. He's always in profile, with his head sort of upturned.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's only I'm just paging through. I'm I don't think you do ever see his face head on. But there is, towards the end of the book, there is a 3/4 shot.
Well, that's what I was about to say. It's really not until I was looking at that 3/4 shot, where he's talking with Hannah, and that's after. That's after he. That's after he lost his eye, and so you get that 3/4 shot where you can actually see his full face because you can see that he's missing an eye. So he is no longer symmetrical, and he is. This is also, these are the panels where he and Hannah are telling the story. They're reliving their past, and the lettering, the balloons start intertwining because they're coming together, as that's the symbolism there.
Right.
Yeah.
Connecting instead of him bulldozing.
Right, exactly. And that might be the only page where you
there's one where he's with Ignacio, his our narrator.
His twin, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Eric,
few.
do you want to talk about Ignacio?
We were going to bring that up, yeah. So one of the other things we've kind of been touching on it, we've been talking about it, but one of the like main themes of this book is dualism.
Mm-hmm.
And like the black and white, yes, no, a strict on-off view of looking at the world.
Right.
And I love, from like a literary standpoint, I really, really love the way the book is narrated ostensibly narrated by Asterios' stillborn twin brother. So
right.
he is a character that we do not know whether or not he actually exists. In a
right.
way, you can look at it like that. But it's also like that fits with the yin and yang theme that we're seeing, and I love the that page where in like the first chapter, or I guess it's the second chapter really, where Ignacio starts narrating the story. And he introduces you to Asterios, and he introduces himself, and that beautiful page of the 3 panels at the top with Asterios as a fetus right side up, and then the middle panel is just the all purple panel with the text, and then the third panel is Ignacio fetus upside down.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a silhouette.
Yeah, it's just a silhouette. Perfectly illustrates the dualism yin and yang that they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like the whole the idea of whether or not he exists, because it also goes into the whole. They talked about. I think which was it the theater character. The idea was brought up about is death the opposite of life?
Right. How do you actually know a thing is the opposite of a thing?
How do you know that a thing is the opposite of the thing? So I really like Ignacio. He's a good counterpoint to Asterios because you can't say that he's dead. So he really is like a beautiful, like ambiguous opposite of Asterios, because Asterios is alive, that we know. So the opposite of that is this ambiguous unknown.
Right. Yeah, I like how he's often depicted too as like this sort of shadow, or just a kind of a shade next to or behind Asterios. Mm-hmm. Just it's like it's a shadow of something there, but what is it really? It kind of leaves some mystery and strangeness to it, which I thought was kind of compelling.
Well, I think, like I said, I think he's like a Shakespearean, like, perfect narrator.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
He sees it from a distance, but he's very much, like, involved in a way, like, you question, is he real or not?
Right. But it allows him to be, like, a personable character. Like, he's got ties to the characters in the story while still existing outside of the story. He can completely break the fourth wall. Because of the ambiguous status of what he is.
Right. This is a I think a really fun book to talk about. Mm-hmm. And also kind of a challenging one, because as we're talking about these things, I'm like flipping through it, and I'm like, you could jump all over because of the density of the material. Like there's just and I think it's a testament to how good it is. There's a lot to chew on and enjoy. In terms of themes overlapping and being revisited. I want to talk about the kind of the sequence where it's sort of like a dream sequence toward the end, where Asterios pulls up to the auto repair garage and his brother is there also repairing his car.
Yes.
And I don't want to jump ahead if you want to save that for later.
Oh, no, that's fine. We can talk about that.
Okay.
Well, I guess what we should say is let's talk briefly a bit about the structure of the book, how it alternates between chapters.
Okay.
So what we see is we'll see a chapter of the present day of like our current narrative of Asterios. Like it starts with his apartment catching fire and he loses everything. The whole apartment burns down. And there's also a nice panel in there. I don't know if you guys if you guys caught this, of his closet with all of his tapes that he was recording himself. That's the final panel of everything being burned. It is the final page is the fires engulfing all of his tapes, and then you just have that one blank yellow panel. So literally, it's like his whole life has been wiped away.
Right.
And so we get a panel of the present day story, and then we have, or I should say, a chapter of the present day story, and then we have a chapter of Ignacio narrating Asterios' past life, and everything that has been going on to get him to where he is now in the present day. And then in between those, we will see these brief little surreal vignettes, I guess you could call them, of Asterios interacting with Ignacio in some way. And it kind of all builds up to that. That is the final sequence, actually, I believe, with Ignacio. Is it?
I believe it is. Yes.
Because every sequence is about Asterios kind of like meeting Ignacio, and as they progress, Ignacio becomes more and more of a character, like he's taking over Asterios' life. And that kind of goes with what Asterios was saying when he was talking to Hannah about how he doesn't know if his life is even his own life. Like maybe it's Ignacio's life. Like if he was the one that was supposed to die in the womb. Basically, it just kind of it's really just bringing up these philosophical ideas of individuality and, are we a sum of experiences, or are we just living out things that are preordained for us? And yeah, that leads us to this last sequence where Asterios sees Ignacio working at the auto shop.
Right. Yeah, good that you filled that in a little bit, because it is a very important. There are multiple sequences that culminate in this sequence. But the what was I going to say? There's a scene too where he explains to Hannah why he videotapes everything in his apartments, and she compares it to the tombs in Egypt and the Chinese emperor's army. Am I right there? Am I remembering right?
Yep. The clay soldiers.
Yeah, kind of this. How to put it? Maybe you guys can sum it up better than me. This need to have some record of his being there, even if no one ever sees it.
Yeah, well, because at first she's like super creeped out by it, like this guy's making sex tapes of her.
Right.
And,
right.
Like that's what she's like. I didn't consent to this. I didn't want to be videotaped, and he has to explain like nobody will ever watch this. It's just more of like proof of existence, Like I was here, this happened, this thing happened. But he has no interest in actually watching the tapes.
Right.
He just wants to document that there's a reality that's real.
Right, and he straight up says that he has never watched them.
Right. But then does she or does he refer to them as his like doppelganger?
He refers to it, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is
Then she brings up the clay soldiers.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
She brings in her Asian influence to it, to rationalize it in her way. She thinks about it as like in this Asian way of thinking.
Okay.
If that doesn't come off as just like silly, but yeah, she definitely brings an Asian perspective to it that he doesn't have. He has he's definitely a Greek Italian. And has his set of rules, and then she brings to the story. She's the first thing in his life that challenges him in the way that he believes the world is. She's the first thing to be like, no, there's a whole other way of looking at things.
Right.
And he he tries to sort of, in their relationship, like from the get-go, he's trying to change her to fit his reality. And that's where that conflict rises in their marriage, is because she kind of came in with a sort of set, like, this is my way I perceive the world. And he had his perception of, like, no, there's order, there's truth, there's right and wrong, of like this, there's a right way of doing things, there's a wrong way of doing things. And she's more of a submissive type person, but I think her story is about her finding, like, who she is, in the same way that Asterios is.
Right, I agree. I don't think Hana doesn't have the same problem that Asterios has, of not being able to empathize or accept another worldview or understanding of life. That's definitely Asterios's
I agree.
story.
I'm saying her story is about her standing up for herself.
Yeah, correct.
Like becoming her, being able to say, like, no, like, just because you say it's this way doesn't mean it is this way.
Yeah, that sorry, I didn't catch that the first time you said it. Because that's exactly what that is. Because that's ostensibly why, like, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but I think that's why initially why Asterios and Hana were such a good match for each other, because Asterios was overbearing and Hana was underbearing, and that just sort of, like, worked in a yin and yang way that it appeared that they complemented each other, but really it was just sort of like distorting it too much, because Asterios was smothering Hana.
Literally, at one point.
Literally, yeah. She has the dream where he's suffocating her. Oh God, that nightmare. She has a dream that he's suffocating her, and she starts to scream, and he tells her to be quiet because she's going to wake up the neighbors, and so she does it. She complies.
Right.
Yep. And she tells Asterios, and Asterios is like, that's a weird dream. Like, doesn't
so dismissive.
I wonder what
that's weird.
I wonder what that means.
Well, even in their first meeting, when they first meet at a
as a faculty
party, faculty party.
Faculty party, yeah.
And she tells her his name, or she tells her name. Mm-hmm. I just said that totally. She tells him her name, and he basically decides, no, your name's not that.
Right.
That's not your name.
Right.
I'm going to call you Daisy.
Yep.
And she's just kind of goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, yeah, okay, all right. She never corrects him or changes it, like. And maybe in his mind, he's like, oh, I just gave her a cute nickname. But
right
away, he takes her identity and says, no, this is who you are. In a way that only this character could.
Right.
Like, he's just so overbearing.
He's constantly reappropriating everything around him to fit his need for control or validation, or just to make the world make sense as he likes it to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I believe, Alex, we were going to talk about that final sequence,
right,
with Asterios and Ignacio.
So I feel like I did kind of jump way ahead, but it's the last time where he has sort of this surreal dream sequence with his other self, or his how would you define it? His doppelganger.
His doppelganger, yeah.
Which is why I was kind of curious what you guys thought about the videos and the conversation he has with Hana, because he talks about the videos as this need for this doppelganger, this record, this other self, that he doesn't need to see it, he just needs to kind of know it's there. Mm-hmm. But then you get to this final scene where the narrator, Ignacio, basically sums up all of Asterios' faults.
Yeah.
Which I'd be curious how you guys interpret that, but it's almost like at this point there's finally like a face-off where it's like, okay, this is what I see in myself, or this is what something is making me aware of, and then he responds by bludgeoning it with a tire iron.
Yes. Well,
and then we move on.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that was the moment. I guess it's interesting because this scene, this like dream sequence, is brought out of a moment of violence, because in the previous scene, Asterios is at the bar with the townspeople, and he's getting a little drunk, and some random person attacks him and hits him over the head with a bottle. And it's not actually a random person, it's actually the hobo that he met on his way to Effigy, that he gave the Zippo lighter to. And then that guy is just drunk and just attacks him and hits him over the head with a bottle. And so he has this sequence, which again, like I said, is brought on by violence. And this is the moment where you could say like he's like finally looks into the mirror and actually sees himself, like his full doppelganger, and he's able to. He's forced to see all of his faults, as you said, Alex.
Right.
And that's not comfortable. It's not comfortable seeing your faults. And he sees himself as the snobby, careless, controlling guy that he is. Which, by the way, just a slight tangent. The more I flip through this book, I am seeing other panels of like 3/4 shots of him.
Okay.
But they're very rare.
Very rare, yeah.
Right. But do you ever see a straight-on shot?
I don't think you ever see a
remember.
straight-on
I don't
shot.
think you do.
No.
So I was going to talk about that. So I did a little bit of research getting ready for this talk. So his name, it's shortened. That's
Yes.
Asterios Polyp, but originally it was something else. Like it was a Greek name, and I want to say and I didn't do enough research to say definitively, but the Cyclops in Jason of the Argonauts has the same name, and so you see only his one eye in almost all of the shots. So you only see the one eye.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I actually pulled that up as well. It's I think it's also from the Odyssey, and
there you go.
The Cyclops' name was Polyphemus.
Yeah.
Polyphemus. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, that correction was perfect. Awesome. But yeah, no, I saw that and I'm like, oh, it's all about dualism. The book's all about dualism, but you see, he only has one point of view.
Right.
He only sees it one way, and then to the point where he actually loses an eye. It's just, I think that's hugely important.
It's a very perfect symbolic representation of his singular point of view.
Well, and after he loses his eye, they have a moment where he's getting a bottle of beer passed to him and he drops it.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about how he's not used to the parallax.
Right.
Or the lack of the parallax.
Yeah, the lack of parallax.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like he always saw things only one way, and it wasn't until one of his eyes was taken from him that he realized that he was missing something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you have the symbolism of eyes, but it's built totally into the design of him as well, where you only see the one eye 99% of the time. He only sees he only sees things one way almost the entirety of the book. Which I think gets into the design ideas and the genius of this book is that nothing is drawn. You're not seeing drawings of reality. You're seeing symbols.
Hmm.
The characters themselves, everything is a symbol of something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And nothing is drawn like in any sort of representational way. It's
Right.
code. It's a code for storytelling.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, I mean the story itself is, I mean, if you were to really sum it up in just a few sentences, it's a guy who has been selfish and his life falls apart and he has to come to terms with things and realizes that he messed up his marriage, right? Like it's a fairly simple story, but then it's incredibly rich because of how the art reinforces all of the ideas.
There's sort of an artist. There's an academic approach to storytelling and an academic approach to design that you don't see in comics. Like, you just don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it stands out as being this like thoroughly thought out, intelligent. Like, there's nothing in there that's not supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
At no point you're like, oh, this is just extra detail that doesn't need to be there. Everything that's there, every line is what has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Almost minimalist in places. I think you could call it a minimalist design aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
The fact that he will just use, a very limited color palette, or he'll let the white space be very prevalent, so as to reinforce whatever story beat he's going over. I really like how well some of the pages breathe. Like it makes simple things stronger, because it can be cluttered, but it can also be very, just the composition can be very spaced out, and it's just nice. It just reads really well.
Yeah, that's one thing I do love about this book, is the page compositions are just they're so subtly perfect. Like, you can look at all these pages, and the combination of the art and the lettering, it leads your eye everywhere it needs to go.
Yeah.
I mean, there is never you can read some comics. Like, I've had this problem before where I've talked to people who don't read a lot of comics. Well, like in an old episode we did on Empowered, I had a bunch of girls on the episode who have never read comics to read Empowered and see what they thought. And they all three said they didn't know how to read a comic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't know how to read a comic. And they're like, do I read the picture first and then the words, or do I read the words and then the picture? Like, how does this work? And I guess I can kind of understand that. But like a book like this, the design is so perfect that, like, you can look at a page and you can just follow. Your eye is directed across every aspect of the page that it needs to go. There's never any confusion about like what you're supposed to be looking at or what you're supposed to read.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so smooth.
Yeah.
Like, just like, and story conveyed. Next page.
And
story conveyed.
And that's with like this. It's not even following like any sort of like panel structure, like a grid structure, like a comic strip. Like you said, there's a lot of open panels and a lot of open lettering where there's just text on the page outside of panels, and it still flows so smoothly.
I think it's a testament to. Well, sorry, go ahead. I've been talking.
I was going to say it's almost like, so I think we've all read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and
yes,
it's sort of like essential reading.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like when you start seeing like how Mazzucchelli does the design and layout in this book, it's the sort of stuff that like Scott McCloud would see and be like, oh, I kind of have to rethink how I think about comics now.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely like how simple can you make it to build, like, there's that wonderful part in Understanding Comics where he talks about, you know, the more simple a character is, the easier, or that the character design is, the easier it is for us to relate to the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, this is sort of proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
Of, like, this guy is a symbol of a character that we all can relate to, whether we want to relate to him or not. Or any of the characters, they all have their archetypes of characters. And the way that the layout works is that you have these great simplifications so that instantly you read it as language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're not seeing, like, oh, that's a beautiful drawing of a truck or a building. You're like, no, that's building. Like that's the word building in my head. Now, like, you don't have to think, should I read the art or should I read the lettering? You're reading instantly.
Right.
Okay, truck, house, person, Asterios, Ursula. You're reading it as code.
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Kevin. We could like talk all day about all the different, a lot, like, these repeated symbols in the book, and there's the repeated themes. It really is so dense.
Yeah, it rewards multiple reads.
It does. It absolutely does.
This is my second reading of it too, so it was interesting to see it a second time.
Yeah, you start to see stuff in the back and the front, and it's like, oh wait, he's connecting that. It's connected all over the place.
Yeah. Well, like, even like one of the simple earliest ones is when Ignacio is first introducing you to Asterios, and he says, like, it's within the first, like, you know, in that second chapter, and he says, it was at university that he met his wife, and they have that panel of Asterios, and the lettering is cut off inside the panel because you're seeing it from, like, it's like just like a little clipped view of some other scene.
Okay.
And then later on, when we see the actual scene, you see it from a different perspective, and you see that panel, like in the first time we see it, when Ignacio is telling it, we're seeing it from Hana's perspective. We're seeing Asterios across the room behind Hana, and his friend is next to him drinking. And then later on, we see that exact same scene, but we see it from Asterios' perspective, and Hana is across the room, and Asterios is standing there, and he goes, "Hey," and his conversation continues. But I really like the way that that scene is presented from the two different perspectives. Again, repeating the dualistic theme.
It's good, man.
Yeah, it's good.
I'll just keep saying how good and interesting it is.
It's good. It's real good.
Really good.
We'll just say that for an hour.
Yeah.
So
Our
good,
academic
you guys.
analysis.
Let's just dispense. Let's simplify our conversation down to the most minimalistic way that we can, in a way that Asterios would be proud. It's good. It's real good. Very good.
Very good.
It's like a 9-second podcast.
Yeah.
Just walk away.
So
hey, this is Comics DNA. It's good. All right.
Thanks for
See you
listening.
later next time.
Let's talk a little bit about the sequence, where Asterios is enacting the Orpheus play. Because let's see, that's after the long montage of him and Hana, and like all the times like in their marriage together. And I really like this sequence because this is, oh man, just the way the book builds. So like I don't want, I'm like going to keep going back and back and back because like there's the scene where they have their fight, and we haven't really talked about Hana's like part of her story. Like she gets the job working for this theater guy. She's going to do all this production design, and he is sort of like a little like gremlin mirror version of Asterios.
Right.
You know, because he's exactly like Asterios, except he's really tiny and unattractive, and he's asymmetrical in his design. He also has his nose always drawn, sticking up.
Uh-huh.
But he's arrogant, and he's exactly like Asterios.
Right.
And
but I think in a different way, where he's
repulsive.
right, but also like his artistic like values are very different than Asterios's.
Yes.
Asterios is definitely more. There's a truth and simplicity and minimalist, where God, his name slips my mind, but the counterpoint is where this guy's more emotion, feeling, and in a totally different way than Asterios is.
Right.
He's not minimalist at all.
No, I would agree to that. Yeah.
But it's interesting because they're sort of, like you just said, they're kind of very different philosophically. You could sort of, there's a scene where it's talking about how all his plays are just mishmashes of other plays.
Yes.
Which is a very kind of more recent kind of postmodern approach to things,
right.
Whereas Asterios is much more like hardline modernist. The world needs to fit into these like beautiful rational ideas. But they're both philosophical blowhards, right?
Right.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
they're different, but they're the same.
Well, that's why there's such a conflict between them, because they both think they're right. Their way is the right way, and the whole book is about the fact that things are not one way or the other. It's not. There's no yes or no, and there's no good and evil, and right way or wrong way.
Right.
It's that the world is different than that. Like, we have to sort of see the bigger picture and the fact that there's
a spectrum of gradients. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I'd be reluctant to say it goes so far as to maybe address good and evil, but like the importance of like the nuance of beliefs, maybe. I don't know. Just a personal take. I feel like
I don't think they're getting into like a meta like good and evil, but more of like right and wrong, correct and incorrect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I would also say that the concept of good and evil would also fit into like the dualistic theme of what they're talking about. Like, it's not necessarily that it's about good and evil, but I think it applies.
I think that's I think there's a lot to chew on there. I wonder. He leaves it very kind of open, I guess. I'm reluctant to read too deeply into.
Right.
Like I guess my thought is it does seem like he's presenting a clear, better way. Asterios grows as a person, so he is saying that he becomes more good through the trajectory of the story. So I don't feel like it's value neutral. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Is that like Mazzucchelli's point of view is like it's not saying that there's no such thing as like morality, like the morality of the story that exists.
Right.
Like it's about bettering the character.
Right. It's more of a critique of these sort of hardline stances that make a person incapable of connecting with other people. Maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You can disagree.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Okay.
But so we were talking a little bit about Hana's situation with the character Willie Ilium. That's his name. The choreographer, which Asterios calls him Willie Chimera because all of his plays are just mishmash. And Hannah's working for him, and of course Asterios doesn't like him. And one of the things I really like about this story is we see the dissolution of Asterios and Hannah's marriage. And you're seeing these scenes, like obviously Asterios does not like Hannah. She's getting more attention and she's getting more of the spotlight, which from a selfish point of view, like from Asterios' point of view, like that bothers him, even though he won't admit that bothers him. But what I really like is how at first you see Willie kind of occasionally saying something that sounds like it's a double entendre or might be kind of inappropriate. And it looks like Asterios would be getting really mad about that. But he's just being controlling and he's being unfair. And that's just part of his, maybe he's just imagining that there's something there. Like he's getting jealous of Willie's relationship with Hannah. So I really like when later on, when they have their big argument, and it all breaks down and it all comes out, and it just ends with Hannah saying, with her crying and just saying, "Why do you always let him talk to me like that?" And that's where you kind of have this realization of like Hannah knows exactly what Willie's doing, and Asterios also is not imagining it. Like it really is happening, but he's not doing anything about it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
That was like a beautiful, like this whole sequence where like the art starts to separate between their two personalities and their two styles. Man, that's a beautiful sequence.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a pretty powerful sequence instead of being when they first meet his rigid geometric shape, he's represented through rigid geometric shapes and she's sketchy, and the panels start to become unified and both elements are present. And then when this sequence occurs, they start to pull apart.
Yeah.
Reinforcing what is happening.
Man, but even like when they're having their argument, and there's that page where the first panel is a circle with her back to him.
Yeah.
And the bottom panel, she asks him all these accusing questions. What makes you think you're right? And there's the 3-panel sequence. It looks like a bowling scorecard, and it's got the first 2 panels of possible answers with the big X's over them, so as not to say them.
Where she just, well, no, I think he says those three phrases.
Oh, you think he does?
And she discounts them. She just says, nope. That's not. I'm gonna not accept that. I'm not gonna accept that. And then she finally accepts the third
one
phrase, because it's not him choosing. If it was him choosing, it would be his color. There.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right, because it's the red over the blue. It's
her color. Yeah. I think we should talk a little bit about the fact that there's color, the way that color is used, and the way that this book as a printer, this book would have been a nightmare to print, an absolute disaster. I was going to take it into work. It's basically like a magnifying glass with a light on it, which allows you to see the dot pattern of the printing. I want to say these are printed with Pantone inks. Each color gets a plate, I think, in the book. But I don't know because I haven't looked under it with the loop at work. I might actually take it to work tonight to look at it under finer detail. But I think that each color has its own plate, and that's why you don't see black. You don't see. I think each of these are specific Pantone inks.
Interesting. Not being the most knowledgeable of how how
normally
works,
colors.
I'll take your word for it.
Normally colors are CMYK. You see,
right.
black, a red, a blue, and a yellow. Where I think these are true color inks, but I'm not sure. I don't think this is CMYK. I really don't think so. I think it's printed. I mean, I could be wrong, but maybe later in the book it's CMYK. But for the most part, I think these are true color inks, and they're not process inks. But I could be wrong.
The colors in this book, it really is such a unique looking book. I think, Kevin, you had mentioned this to me when we were talking the other day. There is no black lines in this book anywhere.
No.
It's
Which is
all
funny.
color.
When things are all black and white in the character's mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
That there's not there's white, but there's
no black.
There's no.
Yeah. Anytime anything is dark, it's purple.
Yep. I think, and as an artist, just thinking about how hard would this book have been to make, as an artist, be like, just so much thought has to go into every square inch of color, line, shape, symbol, value. It's
just as a created object. I mean, the coloring, the dust jacket, it's all so intensely coordinated.
Well, your dust jacket, I'm assuming, is like mine, where the dust jacket doesn't fit.
Right.
Right. It doesn't cover the whole book. Yeah. There's just a lot of decisions that were
beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, the design of the book is
different,
straight up. Again, the symbolism doesn't stop just inside the book. The whole book, everything about the design is fitting with that. The two-tone cover, the purple and gray, black and white, and then the dust jacket that is too small for it.
Right.
Well, even like the title lettering on the cover.
You got the three.
Any one of those tones separated out, and you can't read the title.
Right. Which that's going with the that was like that revelatory moment that he had when he's at the bar, and he's talking about they're talking about something. Now I'm just gonna look at it because it's where he has his dualistic nature challenged, because she places up the three beer coasters, the three coasters, and has all three of them leaning on each other. And she says, if you remove any one of them, the whole thing collapses. And she equates it to a relationship, trust, and love, trust, and respect. That's how a relationship works. And that's like his moment where he completely that's where his worldview is. He starts to consider something else. Because early on, there's a scene earlier on when Hana wants to bring that table in, and it's a three-legged table, and he says, "I don't think in threes." He keeps coming up with reasons not to have it, and she keeps coming up with reasons to have it, and then the final statement is, "I don't think in threes." And then that's his awakening moment when he finally does think in threes, and that's again reflected on the cover of the book.
The table's interesting. I didn't know this. This was another thing that came from looking at other people talking about this book. But the cat is named Noguchi.
Yes.
And that is actually, Noguchi is a table designer. There's a table that's a famous minimalist table.
Okay.
Coffee table. It's a coffee table made by a designer named Noguchi. And the fact that the table was entering into his life into that way, and the cat was also a table. It's literally, the cat is named after a table. It's interesting. It's crazy how much thought went into this.
Yeah. There really needs to be a companion book to it.
Alan Moore.
I was going to say,
for Asterios Polyp.
Yeah, we get him.
Just a breakdown of
We get them for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I could use one for Asterios Polyp. I tell you what.
Yeah.
There's so much. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it took him 10 years to make it, if I'm correct. It was a 10-year project.
I did not realize that. I knew he'd been working on it for a while, but wow. I mean, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think. Go ahead.
I'm curious. I mean, it's very much an artsy comic. I don't know if you would throw it amongst, the indie genre, or if that word even means anything. But I really like it, and part of the reason I like it, apart from the fact that it ties into a lot of things that I've been interested in, architecture and art, and etc., is that it tells this story, and the story's interesting, and it doesn't. I have to put this nicely. I'll just say it. There are a lot of artsy comics that rub me the wrong way, or they. It would be really easy for a comic like this that has this much philosophy and this much, by way of deliberate design decisions, to feel pretentious. It doesn't feel pretentious to me, does it? How do you guys feel about it? Like, despite all of the stuff that he piles in there, does it strike you as being? I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I think it is pretentious.
Okay.
But you're supposed to hate that pretense.
Okay.
The pretension of like, you're not supposed to like Asterios.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these big ideas thrown in by him and by, well, ostensibly through David Mazzuchelli, like that. There's all these big ideas, but you're also supposed to be like, you know what? Screw these big ideas. There's this whole other thing, like yeah, he has all these thoughts, all these things, but the whole point of it is getting that out of the way so that something real can happen.
Right.
Something can feel more than just like, I have this degree and you should respect my ideas because I'm an academic and I read this book and this book, where he's literally thrown into this world where nobody has degrees, nobody's talking about big ideas. They're just living life, and like he has to sort of wrap his head around it in that way.
Well, that's talking about that, like real, like being real. Again, that's still reflected through his whole career of being an architect who's never had a building made. Right. Everything he does is theory. His whole life is theoretical. And that's, I guess that's the awakening, is that it's not until after he's able to sort of reflect on this that he starts to have a real life. I think, but going back to your question, Alex, about it being pretentious, I agree. I don't think. I think that really what sells this book is that, despite all of this rigid structure and all of this like deep, alliterative, referential themes and symbols that are just flying all over the place. Like, the first time I read it, I didn't catch nearly half of what all this was supposed to represent. But you can read it and you can know that it's there for a reason, even if you don't get it. But there is still, at its heart, a very, very human story to latch on to. The story of Asterios and Hannah's relationship is still very, it's very real, and it makes sense. Even though the story is being told through all of these symbols and and the structure, you read it and you recognize these characters, and you recognize these human interactions, even if you're not thinking about them in terms of like this dualistic nature. You're not thinking about them in terms of, this person has a rigid, thinks of life this way, and this person thinks of life this way, and the art shows that they, work together. You still get these situations, and you can still look at it, and there just is that human connection to the characters.
Well, that goes back to the Scott McCloud idea of the simpler it is, the more relatable it is.
Yes. I agree.
it's a simple idea told with simple symbols so that you can feel it. And like, I mean, I think most people, like, their brains work that way, where, you know, like things trigger emotions, you know, and that's why it feels like we know these characters, and they're like, what they went through was something real, you know. It was a real experience. It's because we can actually relate to the simplicity of it, the truth. Maybe there's more truth in this, you know, like maybe Mazzucchelli got to a simple truth in cartooning without, at the same time, sort of criticizing whether there's actually a truth.
Right. I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. It seems like simplicity and humanity were two words that you guys both mentioned a lot there, and I feel like I like that. I feel like the characters are all very, with the exception of maybe Willie Ilium, who's kind of like, as was mentioned, repulsive. Even Asterios, who is a jerk, he's presented in a way it's human, it's engaging, and it's relatable. So I don't know. I think it's pretty.
So who would you recommend this book to?
That is a good question, because I can imagine that people that love comic books, the people that are reading Batman and Daredevil, probably wouldn't have much patience for this book. I'd say on a curve, I would say like the majority of them. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of crossover, because I mean, I love Batman Year 100, and I love Daredevil Born Again. In fact, we're going to be talking about Daredevil Born Again pretty soon on this podcast, I think. So I love both those books, and I love this book. So I'm sure there are other people out there that can enjoy both. But I think I would recommend this book very highly to people who don't read comics or just don't have any interest in reading comics.
Yeah.
I really think that this really almost is like a comic book for people who don't know what comics can be or only think of them in a certain way, which is to say children's superhero entertainment.
Right. It feels a lot more like a literary novel.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it'd be awesome to throw this into an art theory class.
Oh yeah.
As like required reading. Because I think it challenges like the idea of art theory, of there being universal truths, and there being like a right way of doing things. At least that's the way my art theory class was taught.
Yeah.
Was art through history has been reaching towards truth and towards finding the right way of doing things. And, you know, I think it'd be interesting to like throw this as like a wrench in the gears into a class like that. But I don't think it has to exist academically. I think it's literature. It's not Batman and Superman, which is I don't read that stuff anymore. I mean,
yeah.
And I don't think I ever really read it either. Like, I never in comics, like, it's always been for me, like, if I'm gonna pick up a mainstream superhero comic, I'm not reading it. I'm just admiring the art. You know, there's stuff that I pick up and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, great art, but it's not great in the way that this is great. It's not monumental like this. It's interesting. Like you might pick up something where there's a certain artist of the week that you're like, oh, this guy's great. You know, he's really talented. But what more could he do? And I think Mazzucchelli like gets to this point where like he was the greatest inker penciler of his time, like maybe not appreciated in the way that, like a Jim Lee or a Rob Liefeld. He never like reached stardom, like where he was bigger than the characters he was working on.
Right.
But he was a guy who was able to go like, I have this skill set. What can I say with it? What more can I say? What can be actually achieved? Which is amazing.
Yeah, I do agree. This book really is like the gauntlet is thrown down. Like he took comic art as a medium and said, I can take it further. And he took it further. And in a way that it's one of those things I don't want to heap too much praise on Mazzucchelli. I mean, obviously this is a genius piece of work.
It's an accomplishment.
It's an accomplishment, yeah, to no end. But
he's not the only.
Yeah, he's not the only person who's
do
doing this. He's not the only person to try. I just think it's really fascinating. Sometimes it seems like it's so hard to find comics that can do that, because I think that there's so little motivation for people to really try and experiment with comics. Because
who do you think is on par in this sort of like
with
literature?
I think a lot of this would have to be. I look at writer artists. So of course you have Dan Clowes. You have
say Craig Thompson comes to mind.
Chris Ware, of course.
But I'm going to say there's as much as I love Craig Thompson's work, I hate Blankets. I hate it.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Interesting.
It's one of those books that just really like I just see it and I hate it.
We're going to talk about.
And I loved it so. I loved it so much when I first saw it, and like the more I see it now, it just like makes me mad that it's on my shelf.
We're gonna have to talk about this one. We're gonna have to do a part like all this again.
Definitely. We're gonna do a Blankets episode. I was planning on next month. If you're interested, Kevin.
Oh, I have to read it.
Right, I understand.
Maybe I'd find something to like in it again. I still haven't read Habibi, which like
I haven't read
every
that
time
one.
I see it, that looks so beautiful, and I think like the guy's so talented. But like Blankets to me is just like it's bothers me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton that could comparing this to Blankets. I think there's a lot of what I was asking before about like do you feel like this has a pretentious quality to it? Like I feel like Blankets I have to reread it because I haven't read it in a long time. I could see it being a book that has a much like is equally artistically revered, but has a much stronger like rubs people the wrong way because this is just artsy, and I don't like.
Yeah.
Like artsy in a bad way, maybe. I don't know.
I see, and like for me, like the art is the thing that allows Blankets to stay on my shelf.
Okay.
Like I think his art, his symbolism, his way of his construction and layout, it's really top notch, really good stuff. But like the story of Blankets, just like, yeah, we get it, guy. You like this girl. Like the most emo, like Death Judy. Like, oh, it really bothers me because it's like in this way, like Asterios Polyp has things to say that matter, and they're bigger. Where Blankets has these. Go ahead. What am I saying?
Blankets is for people who are going to go listen to Bon Iver in the woods. Is that what you get? I think Bon Iver. Is that?
Yeah. I think there's definitely that quality to it where it's like it tried so hard to be this like important work, but it was about something so like. Yeah, we all had a girlfriend. We all like had somebody we liked. We all had to sort of think about religion and our childhood and how we grew up. But it doesn't really say anything. It's just like, yeah, I questioned religion and I had this girlfriend. I was madly in love with her, and it doesn't go beyond that in any way for me. Like,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Where this book, it's like asking adult questions.
He's trying to touch on maybe more universal themes. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. And I
want to have it. I want this longer discussion on blankets. Maybe we should save probably deeper stuff for later. But
I think they're both universal in a way, but I think like blankets has a universal, like, a conversation about something we universally experienced and we're embarrassed about. Like if I look back to that time in my life, I'm embarrassed of it.
okay.
Yeah.
It's like, oh jeez,
Yeah.
like, really? Like I thought that way? Oh jeez.
Yeah.
Where this book is like, oh, this is, if you're thinking about these big thoughts, it already means like I think you're doing something right, like I think like I got to look at the world in a way that yes, I'm intelligent, yes, I have these deep founded beliefs and thoughts, but I have to, move beyond that and think about the world as in a way that's richer and realer. I think that's a more important story but yeah. I can move on, and I'll talk about, I'll have to read Habibi now. Like, it's a beautiful book, but Blankets it's one of those books that like,
Brace your gears.
yeah, like, let's go make snow angels with our high school girlfriends. Come on, guys.
Oh, yeah, we definitely got to do that now. We're doing that. We're doing that podcast now, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. But yeah, I kind of going back to like your initial question. I do think that Asterios Polyp really does kind of stand alone. Not completely alone, but I do think that it stands out as being such a just such a deep book. In like not just what it's saying, but how it says it.
You
have to bring a lot to the table to be able to read it.
Yeah.
You can't come into this with like, I don't think a high school kid is going to be able to read this and be like, I get it. Like,
right.
Like, I think you have to have, and I think I lack a lot of the like we talked earlier about theater appreciation, knowledge, but like I'm definitely not well read enough to know like every theme and every reference and every like. And I think you have to bring so much to the table to get this completely.
Yeah, I think it would be a hard one for younger readers to read. I mean, even like an 18-year-old, I don't know.
I would recommend it to. I mean, I think they could read it because I think
there's a simple story.
Yeah, I maintain that you can read it, and while you would not really be able to absorb all of the like almost the length to which a lot of the symbolism and the references go, you would still be able to completely understand and appreciate the story.
Okay.
I do not think that any of
the shell of it.
Yeah, the shell of it.
Understand the shell.
And I think that's what makes it so perfect, is because when we really get down to it, like you could just read it as a story about, some stuck-up jerk who realizes that he's kind of a stuck-up jerk and tries to reconcile with his ex-wife. You don't have to take it any farther than that. The reason the book is brilliant is because it does take it farther than that.
Right. Would you say it's a story that can grow with you?
Yes, I absolutely would.
Okay.
Well, just because I feel like it did grow with me. Like every time I reread it.
When I read it for the first time, it was back in like 2010. It was before I was married, and now that I'm reading it again after I'm married, like even that, it adds layers of depth to, because I feel like he deals with a lot of humanity in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just it's not just like sad high school girlfriend stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we're getting a little tight on time here, so we'll just wrap it up really quickly before we leave. I want to say, so what do you guys think about the final page, the punchline to the story?
Final page.
Of the he's getting along with Hana. They're talking. I guess I should. Was that?
Do we spoiler warning? Spoiler warning.
I think at this point.
Spoiler warning. Walk away if you're worried.
Yeah. Now that we've talked about every aspect.
Yeah.
That you could,
I guess it's not fair to say the final page, but the final scene. Like he's in the house with Hana. They're talking and they're reconciling, and it pulls back, and that final double page spread of just a giant comet hurtling right toward the house.
Well, and then the preceding,
And
or
then-
the following,
Then the next sequence.
couple pages just like hammers it in to like.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go first on this one?
Sure, I can throw out some thoughts. Actually, no, we're short on time. A lot comes to mind with the final page. Oh golly, succinctly, it kind of makes me chuckle a little bit because it makes me think of, I don't know who first said this, but I've heard it said that, literature can't have just a blatantly happy ending. Like, it's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be something that's left open, or you have to admit that the world is broken, and so even when things are good, something's still bad. And if you don't do that, you're being dishonest.
Well, there's so many great books where, like, that last chapter, like the story wraps up, and then there's that last chapter where you're like, oh yeah, but that's not real. Like, that's just a thing. Like,
right.
Life's not a storybook, and this has that.
So the fact that you have this giant two-page spread of a meteor or an asteroid hurling toward their little home, it's almost kind of a little joke. Like, there's some tragedy in it, but it's almost like I don't know.
See, I thought it was a perfect joke. Like, it's a perfect joke that's not. It's not. I'm trying to think of the way. It's not a joke like in a bad way. Like, it doesn't undermine anything. I mean, it's the perfect style and sense of humor of this book. It is dealing with all these heavy themes, but it's still, there's still some like funny moments in the book, and it's still pretty lighthearted. It's even though it gets really dark in places, when they're delving into failing relationships and whatnot. So just ending it with just this sort of this like I don't know how to say it. It's sort of that like nihilistic laughter of like like, of course, like that's funny to me.
Yeah.
But I forgot what else I was going to say about it.
It kind of this will be the one other thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, and Kevin, you go, and I'll not talk.
Because just for anybody listening, I'm the reason we're coming up on the hard break here. Because I got to bounce out of here pretty quick. So I'll let you go.
I like that. When you have a happy ending, it's great and everybody feels good. And you have this moment of reconciliation between Hana and Asterios. But like, the reality of life is, then the next day, life continues. You have to deal with that. And if anything, life can be really boring, and it can be anticlimactic, and it can be sort of drawn out, and it can be kind of not the kind of stuff that you expect in an exciting Hollywood blockbuster. So in a way, throwing a giant meteorite at their house makes this happy moment kind of you don't know what happens, but if it's the end of them, then
well,
it's actually going out on a high note.
I still see it as a happy ending. I mean, it's still sitting with the themes of, again, the opposite of life is ambiguous, because we wouldn't know. So it's ambiguous as to what's happening with them. But there's also
we don't know that they get hit.
Yeah,
we don't know that.
Right. So there's that ambiguous. There's also a lot of the recurring themes of like chaos and what affects other things. Because I mean the comment, of course, is a reference. It was referenced earlier when they talk about the extinction of the dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. So there's that thematic, like repeating those themes, all tying into the ending here. But I also think that it's still, what's the other thing that it ties into? The story about his mom and his dad dying, and his dad having a stroke and his mom having cancer, and there's that thing she repeatedly says, which is like the only happy. I don't know. She doesn't say this, but my thought, the way I took from it, is the only happy ending is death, because they have that repeated. She repeatedly says that's why they say rest in peace.
She's a Catholic.
Yeah, she's a Catholic. So, but there's that.
Well, yeah, the rest in
peace adage.
Life is stressful, but rest in peace. That's like kind of a victory.
So go ahead.
So
Kevin.
I'm gonna bounce in, and then before I bounce
out, right.
and then drop the mic on my way out. All right. So Asterios, they talk about how he doesn't believe in God. He talks about his mother being a Catholic, and where Asterios, there's a point where they're talking about how he doesn't believe in God, but he really likes the Greek gods, because there's something comforting about. There's chaos in the world, but the chaos is sort of brought on by these sort of like
reflections,
meaningless, like the things that bad things happen because there are these guys in the sky that just like watch this, like throws a lightning bolt
for no reason
and kills someone just cause they can. And we literally start the book with a lightning strike, which is Zeus propelling the story for no reason. It just happens. Meaningless.
Just strikes him.
And we end with one of those sort of cosmic, like Greek gods throwing a meteorite. They don't have a Greek god throwing a meteorite, but we know because of earlier like bits of information given that it's just the gods' whimsy. Like today we're gonna throw a meteorite at this house. And so like the whole book is bookended by these giant cosmic forces, sort of meaninglessly like affecting our hero, and he definitely wants to be the hero, but at the end of the day, like it's meaningless. It's nothing. It's all this struggle and all these things that he's gone through, like it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. We're all gonna die. It's gonna happen. It's just a crazy book. It's so good.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it with that. It's the perfect bookend, the opening and ending. Yeah. The two huge chaotic events.
And they're bigger than him.
Yeah, way bigger.
Which he doesn't like.
Which is really important.
He hates that.
Yeah.
He hates that there's anything bigger than him. And the fact that he had this perfect life, the way that he designed it, and it's destroyed in the first 5 pages by Zeus, by a god, by a Greek god that just says nope, not today. You're not in charge, or you don't get to design what happens and what's going to happen. And the same thing happens. Like he sort of puts his life back together with getting back with Hannah, or at the very least reconciling a little bit with her, to the point where they can have a conversation, and then at the very least his world ends, And like that, I got to drop the mic and be out of here.
That's beautiful, Kevin.
All right.
Thank you, Kevin, for being on the show. I appreciate it, and I will be in touch with you.
Thanks,
we'll be doing more.
All right, guys. Man. You guys have a great
You too. We'll see ya.
You as well.
See ya.
And with that, I think we're going to bring this episode to a close. Alex, thank you also for being on this episode.
No problem. A pleasure.
Good discussion. There's so much we could go on about this book forever. Like there's even more. So much.
I want to like throw out a conversation you had with Ursula earlier now, but
yeah,
but we're good.
We're good. We just gotta
we'll save it.
save it for another time. We'll reread it in a few years and maybe have a new discussion.
There we go. Yeah, it warrants it.
Yes, that's the kind of book it is. So,
Yep.
Thank you everybody for listening. My name is Aaron Walther. You can find me on Twitter and on Facebook. On Twitter, I am at AAWALTHER on Twitter, at AAWalther on Twitter. You can find comics that I have written at newhavencomics.com and aaronwalther.com. And you can find new episodes of this very podcast at comicdna.podbean.com. And I think that is everything that I need to spit out. So next week, or I should say next episode, I'm planning we're going to get to that Supreme episode.
Ooh.
So, Alex, you got to join me for that one. You got a lot of reading to do.
All right, I got to power through this.
Yeah. We were talking about other comics that kind of reach like the depths that Mazzucchelli went for, and I was hesitant to throw out Alan Moore's name because it's a little different than what Mazzucchelli does, but I honestly would say that his comics do have this depth. Maybe not in the same degree that
it's a very different flavor.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very different flavor, but we will definitely be talking about that on this Supreme episode because it's pretty much the same discussion we just had about Asterios Polyp, but it'll be about superheroes. So
There we go.
But yes, thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you all next time.